They chose her birthday. Out of all the days they could have chosen, they picked her birthday. The garden was glowing. The guests were smiling. Her daughters were laughing. And right in the middle of that beautiful evening, his mother walked across the lawn, holding a sealed envelope, like she was about to end someone's life with a single gesture. Her husband stood there and said nothing. The music faded. The crowd went quiet. Her 3 daughters reached for each other's hands. And the woman they were trying to break? She didn't flinch. Because what nobody at that party knew, not her husband, not his mother, not the woman standing too close to him, not even the guests pretending not to stare, was that she had already seen this moment coming. And she had been ready for it for a very long time. The evening had started like something out of a dream. Lanterns hung from white posts all around the garden, glowing gold against the soft blue of the sky. Fresh roses curled around the stone walkway. The long dining tables were dressed in ivory cloth and candlelight. A birthday cake sat near the fountain, decorated with delicate sugar flowers and brushed gold edges. Above the garden entrance, a banner moved gently in the breeze. It read, "Happy birthday, Amara." Children ran through the grass. Laughter floated from table to table. Glasses clinked softly. Somewhere near the patio, a warm jazz melody played low through hidden speakers. It looked like love lived there. It looked like safety. It looked like a woman was being celebrated by the people who cared about her most. For a little while, it even felt that way. Amara stood near the center of the garden, in a champagne-colored dress that caught the evening light every time she turned. She was 43, graceful in that rare way that does not come from comfort, but from surviving things without letting them harden your spirit. She had the kind of calm some people mistake for fragility. They always made that mistake. Because Amara was not fragile. She was controlled, thoughtful, deeply still in the way oceans are still before a storm shifts direction. Across the lawn, her triplet daughters moved like joy made visible. Leora, Sage, and Noelle, 10 years old, bright-eyed and full of life, wore matching pale blue dresses and white sandals. But even dressed alike, they were beautifully different. Leora noticed everything before anyone said it aloud. Sage laughed with her whole heart and loved life before asking permission. Noelle felt everything deeply and carried tenderness in a way that made people protective of her without understanding why. Amara watched them run, and for one brief moment, the weight inside her softened. That was what motherhood had become for her. Not just love, but refuge. No matter what the world was doing around her, one look at her daughters, and she remembered who she really was. She lifted a glass of sparkling lemonade from a passing tray and smiled at a neighbor who wished her happy birthday. She thanked an older couple for coming. She complimented a friend's necklace. She moved through the evening with warmth and elegance. But even while smiling, she noticed everything. She noticed that her husband still hadn't arrived. And when Dorian finally did, he arrived in exactly the kind of way that tells the truth before words ever do. He came in late. Not carelessly late, intentionally late. The gate opened. He stepped inside with his phone still in his hand, jacket crisp, expression distant, like he had shown up to attend something rather than belong to it. He didn't look for his wife first. He didn't kiss her cheek. He didn't walk toward the birthday table. He walked straight to his mother. Bernice was standing near the rose trellis in an emerald suit, posture perfect, eyes sharp, carrying herself with the polished certainty of a woman who had spent decades believing she knew what was best for everyone around her. Dorian leaned close and murmured something into her ear. She gave a small, satisfied nod. That was the first thing people noticed. Not the birthday woman, not the decorations, not the joy. The first thing they noticed was the son and the mother. Then Dorian drifted toward a group of men near the hedge, accepted a drink, and laughed at something one of them said. He checked his phone twice before he looked toward Amara even once. She saw all of it. She always saw all of it. She just never believed in performing pain for an audience. Then the next piece fell into place. A woman entered through the side gate. Her name was Camille. She was younger than Amara, dressed in a white tailored outfit that did not whisper, it announced. She moved with the kind of confidence that suggested she wanted to be noticed and expected the room to adjust around her. Dorian saw her immediately. Not only saw her, welcomed her. When two nearby guests asked who she was, he smiled and called her a business associate. Some people smiled politely. Others exchanged glances. Amara did neither. She simply set down her glass, crossed the lawn to where Noelle's ribbon had come loose, and tied it back into place with gentle fingers. Then she brushed a leaf off Sage's shoulder. Then she touched Leora's cheek. Calm, present, tender. If anyone had been paying close enough attention, they would have seen something important right there. She was not surprised. And when a woman is not surprised by what should have shattered her, it usually means the story is about to turn. As the sun dipped lower, the party began moving toward what should have been the sweetest part of the evening. Guests settled into their chairs. Servers refreshed drinks. Someone called for everyone to gather closer for the birthday toast. It should have been simple. A husband lifting his glass. A few warm words, maybe laughter, maybe tears, then applause, cake, candles, family photos. That was what should have happened. But that was not the evening Bernice had planned. She stood before anyone invited her to. A spoon tapped against crystal. One table at a time, the talking stopped. The garden quieted in waves. Even the music seemed to shrink back. Bernice placed one hand on the back of a chair, lifted her chin, and looked around the lawn with the expression of a woman who believed she was about to be remembered for telling the truth. And then she began. She said, "There comes a time when silence stops being graceful and starts becoming dishonest." She said families often stay quiet for too long in the name of peace. She said her son had given years of his life to a marriage that, in her opinion, had long stopped honoring him. The air changed. People stopped blinking so much. A woman near the fountain looked down at her lap. A man near the buffet shifted his weight and suddenly became very interested in his glass. No one wanted to make eye contact with Amara, but everyone wanted to know how she was taking it. Bernice kept going. She implied that Amara had never truly belonged. She suggested there were things hidden from the family from the beginning. She spoke in polished half-accusations, the kind designed to sound respectable while doing the work of cruelty. She said Dorian deserved a future more aligned with who he really was, more open, more honest, more suitable. Still, Dorian said nothing. That silence said more than any speech ever could. Camille stood a little farther back, watching carefully, her face composed, but pleased in the smallest, coldest way. Then Bernice opened her handbag, and the entire garden seemed to hold its breath. She removed a cream envelope, sealed and crisp, and began walking toward the birthday table. Slowly, deliberately, like she had imagined this moment before, like she had practiced it. The candlelight hit the ring on her finger as she set the envelope beside the untouched birthday cake. Then she looked directly at Amara and said, "Consider this closure." That was the moment everything froze. Leora reached for her mother first. Sage stepped close on the other side. And Noelle, sweet, tender Noelle, started crying before she even understood why. Tears slipped quietly down her cheeks, as if her heart had recognized the danger before her mind had caught up. Amara turned to her daughters before she looked at anything else that mattered. She placed one hand gently over Leora's fingers. With the other, she touched Sage's shoulder. Then she wiped Noelle's tears with her thumb and leaned down just enough for the little girl to feel her mother's steadiness before hearing it. Only after comforting her daughters did Amara look at the envelope, then at Bernice, then at Dorian. He still said nothing, and Amara gave one slow nod. Not a broken nod, not the nod of someone defeated. It was the nod of a woman confirming what she had already known, the kind of nod that says, "I see exactly what you're doing." The kind that says, "You think this is the end because you have no idea where this story actually begins." Because what none of them knew, not one of them, was that the garden beneath their polished shoes, the fountain behind the cake, the house connected to the patio, the land holding all of it together, everything they had treated like shared family space, belonged entirely to Amara. Legally, completely, quietly. And that was only the smallest part of what she owned. The truth was so much larger than the envelope on that table that if they had known it, not one of them would have dared to stand there the way they were standing. But to understand why Amara did not break that night, you have to go back. Far back. Back before the dress, before the marriage, before the garden. Before anyone had ever mistaken her softness for helplessness. You have to go back to a small coastal town in South Carolina, where the mornings smelled like wet soil, cedar wood, and biscuits warming in the oven. Where the roads were narrow, the porches were wide, and people still believed a person's word should mean something. That was where Amara came from. That was the soil she was made of. She lost her parents when she was 8 years old. A winter accident on a dark stretch of highway changed everything in a single night. She never remembered the event in order. Children rarely do. Pain rearranges memory. What she remembered was being wrapped in her grandmother's shawl. She remembered the porch light glowing through the dark. She remembered the smell of cinnamon and cedar inside the farmhouse. She remembered grief arriving before language did. And somewhere inside all that grief, something else arrived too. Resolve. Not loud resolve. Not dramatic resolve. Just a quiet decision, deep down, that life could hurt her, but it would not own her. Her grandmother, Evelyn May, was not a wealthy-looking woman. She did not dress for attention or speak just to fill silence. But there was strength in her that made people lower their voices around her without knowing why. She understood land. She understood timing. She understood the difference between appearing powerful and actually being protected. She raised Amara with that same wisdom, not to chase noise, not to argue with every insult, not to prove herself to people committed to misunderstanding her. She taught her to be rooted, to be patient, to build what others could not recognize until it was far too established to dismiss. When Amara was 19 and leaving for college, Evelyn called her out onto the porch at sunset. The light was fading into gold, and the whole yard smelled like jasmine and fresh-cut grass. From the pocket of her apron, Evelyn took out a thin bronze chain with a small compass pendant attached to it. It was old, worn smooth from years of being touched, and warm from being kept close. She placed it in Amara's palm and closed her fingers around it. "This won't tell you where the world is," she said. "It will remind you where you are." Amara wore that compass every day from then on, through college, through business school, through years of meetings where men underestimated her because she did not interrupt them, through strategic investments, through contracts, through long conversations with attorneys, through marriage, through motherhood, through every season when being overlooked worked in her favor. She met Dorian in her mid-20s, when charm still looked enough like character to be convincing. He was handsome, polished, easy to talk to, and naturally good at making people feel seen. In those early days, he seemed light-hearted in the best way, hopeful, ambitious, warm. He laughed easily. He remembered details. He brought flowers for no reason. Amara loved him honestly. That was the hardest part. Not that she had been deceived, but that she had loved sincerely while others loved conditionally. They built a life that, from the outside, looked beautiful. School photos in silver frames, holiday dinners, parent-teacher meetings, Sunday breakfasts on the patio, matching winter pajamas, family vacations, birthday candles, soft routines, shared calendars, grocery lists, the ordinary architecture of a stable home. And within that life, Amara gave everything real. She read bedtime stories in 3 different voices because each daughter liked a different one. She remembered who hated peas, who loved astronomy, who still needed a hallway light left on after bad dreams. She built emotional safety into the walls of that house, without anyone ever calling it labor. But while she was loving her family, she was also building something else. Something almost no one knew existed. For years, Amara had worked closely with her attorney and advisor, Graham Hale, a man her grandmother had trusted long before Amara was old enough to understand contracts. With patience and precision, they transformed inherited land rights, mineral interests, water access holdings, and early acquisitions into a private company that grew slowly, intelligently, and almost invisibly. Its name was Evelyn Bay Holdings. It began with history, then became leverage, then capital, then structure, then scale. And over nearly 2 decades, it became one of the most quietly powerful private holding groups in the region. Amara never revealed the full size of it, not even to Dorian. Not because she was playing games, because she believed something her grandmother had taught her long ago. Never hand someone the map to your entire life before they've shown you what they do with a front door key. And over time, Dorian showed her. Not all at once. That would have been easier. Instead, it happened slowly, in the small permissions people give themselves when they start believing comfort is guaranteed. He grew less present, more careless, easier to flatter, more responsive to admiration than to loyalty. He liked being seen well, even when he was not living well. Bernice had always encouraged that side of him. She had never fully embraced Amara, though she had smiled through weddings, church events, holidays, and school recitals. Bernice believed in polished families, proper matches, appearances that reflected well on a name. In her private mind, Amara had always been too quiet, too private, too hard to classify. And people often resent what they cannot easily define. Camille entered the picture the way these things often do, gradually enough to be denied. First through work functions, then through mutual dinners, then through casual mentions that happened too often to be casual. She laughed at the right jokes. She listened like she was collecting useful information. She knew how to stand near a man without making him feel cornered, and how to make a family think her presence was temporary while she was quietly becoming familiar. She learned the daughters' names, their favorite subjects, their habits, their routines. She learned too much too fast. Amara noticed. Of course she noticed. But not every observation deserves immediate confrontation. Some deserve documentation. Some deserve patience. Some deserve enough time to reveal whether what looks like smoke is actually fire. By the months leading up to the birthday party, the house had changed. Dorian came home later, and when he was home, he still felt absent. He sat at the dinner table with his phone face down and his attention somewhere else. He stopped asking real questions. He stopped finishing conversations. The warmth that once made him easy to love began turning into a distance nobody could hold comfortably. The daughters felt it first. Children always do. Leora grew quieter. Sage started asking if everyone was okay. Noelle began sleeping with the hallway light on. One night, while Amara was brushing out Noelle's hair after bath time, the little girl looked up through the mirror and asked, "Is our family changing?" It would have been easy to lie. It would have been easy to say, "No, sweetheart, everything is fine." But Amara respected her daughters too much to build comfort out of dishonesty. So she answered carefully. "Yes," she said softly. "Some things are changing, but the most important things are not. My love for you is not changing. My presence is not changing. You will never have to wonder where you belong with me." Noelle looked at her mother's reflection for a long moment and nodded. That same quiet nod. The kind that passes strength from one generation to the next without naming it. After the birthday party, the house became so quiet it almost felt like another person living there. The envelope contained formal separation papers. Predictable. Expected. Almost late. That night, after the girls had finally fallen asleep, Amara went back outside alone. The lanterns were off. The banner was gone. The cake had been taken inside. The garden was just a garden again, empty and dark and still. She sat at the same table where the envelope had been placed. And for the first time all day, she let herself feel everything. Not because she was weak, because she was human. She let herself feel the sadness of loving someone longer than they had deserved it. The disappointment of watching a marriage fade not from one terrible moment, but from many small abandonments. The ache of having to be steady for children while your own heart is learning to stand differently. She cried quietly. Then she wiped her face. She touched the bronze compass at her throat, and she made one phone call. Graham Hale answered on the second ring. "It's time," she said. 3 weeks later, the city hosted its annual Legacy Circle Gala, the kind of event where power dressed itself in elegance and called itself generosity. It was held at a newly restored cultural center downtown. The courtyard was transformed with silk draping, candlelit tables, polished stone, and soft music from a live quartet near the entrance. Judges, physicians, entrepreneurs, nonprofit founders, old families, donors, and people who like to stand near influence, all gathered under one carefully lit sky. Dorian was there. Bernice was there. Camille was there too, radiant in silver, moving through the room like she had already secured her place in the future she wanted. And for a while, Bernice looked pleased. She had spent the previous weeks gently shaping the story in social circles. Nothing too obvious, just enough. Enough to make Dorian appear like a man stepping gracefully into a new life. Enough to make Amara sound like a chapter that had simply closed. People believe polished stories faster than complicated truths, until the truth arrives in person. Amara came in alone, and the room felt it. She wore a midnight blue gown with clean, elegant lines and almost no jewelry except the bronze compass at her throat. She did not rush. She did not scan the room anxiously. She moved with the calm certainty of a woman who did not need approval from a single face in that building. Conversation shifted around her. Heads turned. Even people who had never met her seemed to sense something. Dorian noticed her from across the courtyard, and for the first time in a long time, his expression lost its script. Because something in him understood, before his mind did, that he had misread her completely. The evening's host, Dr. Helena Brooks, stepped to the microphone once the quartet softened. She thanked everyone for attending, spoke about arts funding, youth mentorship, and community development. Then she smiled and said there was one final acknowledgement she had been especially honored to make that evening. She announced that the Cultural Center's restoration, the new scholarship program, and several upcoming community initiatives had all been made possible by one private organization that had worked quietly for years without seeking recognition. A pause moved through the courtyard. Then she said the name. Evelyn Bay Holdings. People listened, but they still didn't understand. Not yet. Dr. Brooks continued. She described a company built patiently over 2 decades, strategic land stewardship, long-term mineral and water rights, commercial and residential investments, equity partnerships, philanthropic expansion, multi-state asset growth. Intergenerational planning. Then she revealed the valuation. Over $18 billion. The courtyard went so still, it almost didn't feel real. And then, Dr. Brooks said the words that changed everything. I would now like to invite the founder of Evelyn Bay Holdings to join me. Amara stood. No dramatic music, no sharp gasp, just the breathtaking silence of assumptions collapsing all at once. She walked to the stage with the same measured grace she had carried in the garden on her birthday. Except now, the whole room seemed to understand they were watching something they would not forget. She reached the microphone and let the silence settle. Then she spoke. Her voice was calm, warm, steady. She spoke about her grandmother first, about a porch in South Carolina, about a woman who taught her that dignity is not something you perform when people are watching. It is something you protect when they are not. She spoke about patience, about quiet work, about how the deepest roots in life grow where no one applauds them. Every word landed, not because she was loud, because she was true. She thanked Graham Hale for helping her build structures that could carry vision across decades. She thanked community partners who believed in long work rather than fast praise. Then she looked toward the table where Leora, Sage, and Noelle were sitting, dressed in shades of blue, staring at their mother with wide, shining eyes. Amara smiled at them, and they smiled back. Then she stepped aside. A screen behind the stage lit up. The first slide showed the Evelyn Bay Holdings crest. The next showed the portfolio. Land assets across 6 states. Water and mineral rights. Commercial properties. Residential trusts. Agricultural technology investments. Private equity divisions. Community development partnerships. A charitable foundation. Education funding. And then, near the bottom of one slide, listed among the residential holdings, was an address. The address of the house Dorian had assumed would remain part of his future. The effect was immediate. People leaned toward one another. Whispers moved through the crowd in rising waves. The birthday party, the envelope, the silence. The woman they had watched stand still while people tried to reduce her. The same woman was now standing before them as the founder of an $18 billion empire built quietly over years. Dorian did not move. He stood there holding his drink as if he had forgotten why it was in his hand. Bernice's face changed by slow degrees, from certainty to confusion, to the first unmistakable signs of realization. Camille looked from the screen to Dorian, from Dorian to Amara, and in that instant understood what kind of story she had actually stepped into. And it was not the one she thought she was winning. Amara thanked the room one final time and stepped down from the stage. She did not go to Dorian. She did not look for Bernice. She went first to her daughters. Sage looked like she wanted to burst from pride. Leora's eyes were shining with the calm, steady admiration children reserve for moments they will remember forever. Noelle reached for her mother's hand and held on tightly, as if the whole room had changed shape and she only trusted the world where her mother was standing. Amara squeezed their hands. Then she turned and began walking toward the exit. She passed close enough to Dorian that he could have spoken. Maybe he wanted to. Maybe for the first time he actually did. But Amara did not stop. She touched the bronze compass at her throat, just once, and kept walking. That gesture was not for Dorian. It was for Evelyn May, for memory, for legacy. For every year she had built in silence while others assumed there was nothing there. The legal process that followed did not become public drama. It did something far more powerful. It became final. Documents Dorian had signed too quickly, trusting half explanations and polished confidence, worked against the future he had imagined for himself. Once his legal team understood the true structure of Amara's holdings, the trusts involved, the ownership records, and the protections already in place, their tone changed fast. What had begun as confidence became caution, then negotiation, then acceptance. The residence transferred fully back into Amara's trust. Several assumptions Dorian had been living on dissolved quietly on paper. He was not ruined, but he was forced to meet the truth. A great deal of what he thought was his had never belonged to him at all. And socially, the correction spread the way real truth usually does. Quietly, steadily, without needing an announcement. Invitations shifted. Phone calls slowed. Some people apologized in private. Some simply became careful. Others did what people often do when they realized they stood on the wrong side of a story. They smiled a little too warmly and pretended they had always seen Amara clearly. Camille left fast. A few unanswered texts, a canceled dinner, a new appearance at another event beside someone else whose future still looked useful. Nothing dramatic. Just proof that some people are loyal only to momentum. Bernice kept her posture. She kept attending luncheons and church functions and charity events, but something about her had changed. Not her clothes, not her voice. The change was deeper than that. It was the quiet strain of a woman discovering that control is not the same thing as power. Because power does not need to humiliate. And real power never needs an audience to become real. The daughters chose to live with Amara full-time. Not after shouting, not after warfare. Just after enough truth had surfaced that even children could feel where steadiness lived. Dorian still saw them. He still loved them. In his own way, he tried. But the distance between intention and trust is not small. And some distances are built one decision at a time. That became his real consequence. Not the legal loss. Not the social embarrassment. Not the house. It was the experience of being seen clearly by the people who once believed in him without effort. There is a very particular ache in that. Weeks later, just after sunrise, the garden behind the house was quiet again. No lanterns, no guests, no music. Just dew on the grass, light slipping through the old oak tree, and the soft sound of the fountain carrying through the stillness. Amara sat at the stone table with a cup of tea in both hands. She was not planning anything, not strategizing, not replaying the gala, not reliving the birthday. She was doing something far rarer. She was resting, really resting. The kind of rest that comes only after your heart realizes it no longer has to brace itself. She touched the bronze compass at her throat and closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of Jasmine, of porch boards beneath bare feet, of her grandmother's hands, of the voice that once told her to remember where she was. And when she opened her eyes, the world felt different. Not because the pain had never happened, but because it no longer had authority over her peace. Then the back door opened. All three girls came running out at once, still in pajamas. Leora with a book tucked under her arm. Sage laughing before she even made it down the steps. Noelle in mismatched socks, already calling, "Mama!" Amara turned in her chair and opened her arms. They ran straight into her, all three at once. The tea almost spilled. No one cared. She held them close, one hand on Leora's back, one arm around Sage, her cheek resting for a moment against Noelle's hair. Morning sunlight moved through the trees in long golden ribbons and settled across the table, across their pajamas, across Amara's hands. After a little while, Leora leaned back and looked at her mother. "Is it really okay now?" she asked. Not with fear this time, with hope. And Amara answered the way women like Evelyn May answer the questions that matter most. Clearly, simply, without hesitation. "Yes," she said, "it is." And she meant it. Not just about the legal papers. Not just about the house. Not just about the people who had misjudged her. She meant that peace had come home again. She meant that love had remained where it always belonged. She meant that what is built with patience, dignity, discipline, and truth may be misunderstood for a season, but it does not disappear. People thought her silence meant emptiness. They thought her patience meant weakness. They thought her softness meant she could be erased. But the deepest roots do not argue with storms. They hold. And when the time is right, they remind the whole world what was there all along. If this story touched you, leave a comment and tell us which part stayed with you the most. Like this video so more people can find stories like this, and subscribe for more powerful emotional stories about quiet strength, grace, and the kind of truth that always rises at the right time.